Okay,
Yep.
so in yesterday's class, we were talking about the general topics on AWS, right? General high level billing, creating an account, and all those stuff, right? So, any questions in that? Were you able to create your AWS account?
Yeah, I'm able to create that account.
Okay.
So I'm in the root account now, so I'm not sure how to change it to other account.
No, no, you can just use the root account for now. For the next couple of weeks, just use the root account for practicing. No problem. Right.
Okay.
After that, we will talk about creating users because now itself, if we start creating users, I mean, it will be a little confusing
Okay.
for you. So for now, you just log in with the root account and practice whatever I'm showing. It is going to be the same, right? Because anyway, nobody else is
Okay.
going to use your AWS account, and you don't store any critical information. So no problem. So just keep your ID and password secure. Don't share your account with other people. That's all.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. So the first topic in AWS we are going to see is S3. Okay. So it's a pretty, what do you say,
Okay.
most commonly used, one of the most commonly used services in AWS, and it does not require much of a background on other stuff, right? It will be easy to understand. So the first topic we will see is S3, first service we should say, right? So what does S3 stand for, right? Or what is S3? Okay. So S3 stands for Simple Storage Service. Okay. S3 stands for Simple Storage Service, right? And one more thing, please try to use the, what do you say, the official, what do you say, name that AWS calls it, like S3, because I've seen some people say S cube or something like that, right? Don't use terms like that, it doesn't sound professional, right? So AWS calls it S3, we will call it S3, we will not give it any pet names. Okay. So S3 stands for Simple Storage Service. So as the name implies, it is a service which provides some type of storage. Okay. So if you want to easily understand S3, right, at a high level, right? So storage means what, storage, like that. So maybe you can compare S3 with something like your Google Drive, right? It is somewhat similar. It is not 100% similar. So somewhat similar, right? So what is Google Drive? It is a place where you can store and share and you can retrieve files, right? You can store, share, and retrieve files, right? Online, right? For using this Google Drive, you don't need any specific, what do you say, software or OS, right? You just need a browser, right? And you need, of course, internet connection, and it can be accessed from anywhere, right? Provided you have the credentials or permissions, right? So it does not depend on any specific software, OS, file system, right? It is just you open the browser, right? You access the storage, you upload, download, you share files among users, or you just keep it private to yourself, right? And you can access it from anywhere, provided you have a internet connection. It does not depend on a specific, what do you say, laptop or a machine or a server, right? Which you manage. All that backend Google takes care of. You just use the storage component, right? And you can store some X amount of uh, data, right? Like you have a 100 GB plan, if you pay extra, or by default you get 15 GB storage of free, and you can pretty much store any type of file that you want over there, right? So S3 also has all these features. It is somewhat similar. So it is a service from AWS where you can store uh, whatever files you want online. It does not depend on any OS or file system or server or anything, right? So it is somewhat similar, but it is much more advanced, right? It is something, it is a storage service. It does not need any virtual machine or anything. It is like online storage or storage on the web. Think of it, right? Storage on the web. right? So we'll just talk about some terms in S3, right? Now we just have a basic understanding of what is S3, right? It is like storage on the web, or right, where you can store your files and you can share the files and you can do much more uh, stuff. We'll see what are those, right? So first thing you have to understand in S3 is object storage, or object based storage, right? All these are what do you say, it is not specific to AWS. These are in general, what do you say, IT terms or IT technology, right? So similarly, Azure, Google, they also have object based storage. So what is object based storage means, the files which you store in S3, right? So S3, you are going to store some files, right? In S3, the files, we call them as objects. Okay. So what is object based storage is, it is different from the other traditional what do you say, storage architectures, right? So it is always easier to learn if you are able to compare with something else, right? So on the other hand, you have something called file systems, right? And you have block storage, right? So what are these, are mostly used as what do you say, storage with your operating system, right? For example, if you have a Windows machine, right, you have some hard drive, right? It will have some file system, right? NTFS or FAT, right? If you are using Linux, the file system is going to be something like ext, right? ext3 or something, right? If you go to enterprises, they will have SAN, right? Storage area network, which is based on block storage, right? What is block storage? Block storage is where your hard drive, right, your storage medium, it is split up into small blocks, right? We will see AWS as a service for block storage also. So block storage is where your storage space is split up into smaller blocks. So whenever you store a file, suppose you store a 1 MB file, let us say, it is split up into smaller blocks and stored, right? It is not one whole what do you say, chunk of data, right? Your block size will be something like 16 KB or 256 KB or something like that, right? So your files, right, suppose it's a 1 MB file, maybe it occupies 6 blocks of data, right? This is block storage. So in block storage, what happens is, suppose you update this file or you make a copy of this file, right? You make a copy or a backup of this file, right? So for you, you can see two copies of your files from your OS or whatever, right? You can see two copies of your file, but in the backend storage, right, it will not duplicate another 6 blocks of data. If it is same, right, then it will just, for you it will show two copies of data, but at the background it maintains only uh, actually it occupies only 1 MB in the storage. We call this deduplication. All this the storage system manages in block storage, right? SAN, you might have heard of EMC and all that stuff, right? All that is block storage, which has some type of file system, and it can be accessed only from a operating system. You cannot access these files what do you say, simply over the internet. You need a machine on which this storage has to be attached, only then you can access it. It's like your hard drive, right? Suppose you have a hard drive, a data in hard drive, how can you access it? It can be accessed only if it is connected to a computer, and that computer should be switched on, right? So this is the other spectrum, right? So S3 is not anything like this, right? S3 is not any of these things. It does not have any file system. It is not block storage. It is something called object storage, where it has a flat structure, right? You don't have any concept called folders, right? So here you have folders, right? In S3, you don't have any concept called folders as such, right? Each file is called a object. It is a flat structure, right? You cannot create any partition files or anything like Google Drive, right? In Google Drive you don't create any file system, or you cannot use it as a local drive for your machines, right? You cannot install any operating system on Google Drive or anything, right? You can just store any file you want, and you can access that file from anywhere. So S3 is also pretty much same, but it is object based. We don't know what is Google Drive, whether it is object based or whatever, but the Google Cloud has a service, Azure has a service for object based storage also called blob or something, right? So S3 is object based storage where it does not have any file system or block storage, and you can access S3 online. You don't need any specific software or anything, you just need internet connection, right? It is much more powerful than the Google Drive, right? Google Drive is just a basic example, right? So that you understand that it does not depend on any specific OS, right? It is object based storage, and where we call the files as objects. So when I say object, it means pretty much a file, right? So what is the capacity, right? Capacity is unlimited. What do I mean by unlimited? So you can store as much data as you want, right? You can store as much or as little as you want, right? So you don't have to request for any capacity. You don't have to say I want 15 GB storage. You can add as much data as you want, it will accept, and you pay for whatever storage you use. If you don't use, you don't pay anything. If you use, you pay some cost. It is per GB. The basic cost is per GB. So AWS, what do you say? We will talk about the main factor, main pricing factor. Plus, it will have some additional costs, right? AWS pricing is not very simple to understand, right? The main pricing factor will be one, plus they will have some additional small charges here and there, right? The main cost is going to be per GB per month, right? Main cost is going to be per GB per month, plus you will have some additional small costs, but the primary cost is per GB per month. Okay, so, and these prices are calculated on a prorated basis. I'll give you a simple example, but in really it's not as simple, right? But I'll say, see, for example, suppose in a month you have 30 days, let us say. Okay, so you are putting some data, right? First, second, third, you don't have any files. On fourth, you are putting some data, some 4 GB of data, right? And then on 14th, you are removing that 4 GB, so it becomes 0. Then for the rest of the month, you are not putting anything. So how much will S3 cost you? Just a rough example I'm giving, then we'll later on talk about more about the pricing, right? So it is not like they will charge you for 4 GB, right? You used 4 GB for how many days? For 10 days, right? From 4 to 14. The rest of the days you don't have anything. So it is somewhat kind of averaged out for the entire month, right? It is averaged for the month, and then you are charged for it, right? Maybe you will be charged for 40 MB or something like that, right? It is not that one day price or anything. That 4 GB is averaged across the month, or the number of days you actually store the files, right? We will see all those calculations, right?
So Sid, as I said, like there's no specific Mac capacity for this object, right?
Yes.
A
No,
single object.
they have some limits, right? But you can store as much data as you want. The only limitation is the file size for one object, that is the file size or whatever it is, I think it should not be greater than 4 TB, I think. Let me just double check that, right? Because anyway, most of the time we don't hit that limit, right? Uh, Sorry. Yeah, 1 second. Yes, 3 object 5 TB or 4 TB? 5 TB. Yeah, 5 TB. Okay. So the maximum file size of one object, right, cannot be greater than 5 TB
Okay.
for one object. That is, if you are uploading a file, right, it can be anything, right? So in S3 you can store whatever you want, whether it's a song, movie, whatever. They don't check all that stuff, right? You can put whatever you want, right? But the limitation being one object or one file should be less than 5 TB, but you can have like that millions of objects, right? And the capacity keeps, what do you say? There is no such total size, right? You can keep adding as many files as you want. It will keep accepting, right? But the file size of one file should be less than 5 TB. Okay, which is the current limitation. I don't think it has been increased, right? So it has been so for a long time. So maybe after a few months or whatever, few years, they might increase that. But currently, one object cannot be greater than 5 TB. If you have something greater than that, please break that up into smaller files and upload it. Okay, so it provides unlimited capacity. So you don't have to ask for capacity in advance. You don't have to say, like in the Google Drive, you have to say, I want, you get 15 GB of storage. If you want more, you have to buy an additional plan, right? It comes in some fixed, what do you say, uh, storage capacities like 100 GB or something. Even if you don't use the 100 GB, you pay for 100 GB, right? So in S3, it is not like that. You don't pay any advance or you don't reserve any capacity. Whenever you add, the cost starts. If you remove, the cost is stopped, right? So it can accept as many files as you can throw at it, right? Okay, the first thing is objects are the files, and then capacity, we know, is unlimited, right? The next term, or actually the first term we are going to use, is something called a bucket, right? So in S3, how it is structured, or what AWS calls it, is a bucket, right? Think of it as a container for your files, or as we say, objects. In S3, the correct word is objects, right? So your objects will be inside a bucket. We represent objects in S3 using these symbols: triangle, square, or a circle. If you see these three things, it means it's representing S3 objects, which is your files. So your S3 objects will be stored inside a bucket. They cannot be outside a bucket. You don't have anything outside. When you open the S3 interface, right, you cannot simply just upload files. You need to create a bucket. A bucket is simply a container. It does not have any, what do you say, capacity or anything. It is just where you put your files. You should not call it a folder, because in S3 technically there is no concept called folder, right? Even though you might uh, come across this word in the console, in the GUI, technically it is not a folder. That word folder is used only for your visual representation or understanding. Technically, S3 does not have any folder structure. It does not have any file system, right? Okay, so it is not based on any file system or folder hierarchy, right? It is a flat file structure. That's what we call it, right? Only in the S3 GUI you will see something called the word folder, but technically it is not a folder. It is called a prefix. We will see what is that. right? But basically in S3, you have something called a bucket. Inside that you have your object. The bucket as such, it does not have any specific capacity or any cost, right? To store your files, you need at least one bucket. You can create multiple buckets if you want to. There is no cost as such for creating a bucket. You pay, the storage is only for the objects which you store, right? And then inside the bucket you have your objects, which is your files, right? And your objects will have some, what do you say, uh, it is your actual data. It is your files or your actual data, right? So these files or data will have some properties, right? The properties we will see as we practice, but I'll just show what do you say, put it across at a high level. You have something called the key. Key is actually the name of the object. These are the technical terms that we use in AWS. Key is nothing but simply the name of the object or file. All right, name of the object, right? And then it will have other things like version ID. It may have, right, some of these things, right? And you will have, you can add something called metadata, right? All that stuff, right? What is metadata? So anywhere in IT, if you hear the word metadata, it is simply data about your data, right? Data about your data. Very simple example. Suppose you have a MP3 file or something, right? So what is the data? It is the song, right? What is metadata? It is data about your data. So your MP3 file may have some properties like artist name, right? Uh, Track length, right? All these are what? It is information about that data. So these are called metadata, right? Anywhere in IT, when you come across this word metadata, what does it mean? It is data about your data, right? Suppose you have a picture, right? What is the data? It is the picture. What is metadata? It is the file format, uh, what type of file it is, what is its resolution. All that is information about your data or about that file, right? So in S3 also you can add these stuff. It is not compulsory, but you can add these other stuffs. But obviously you will have a key. Key is the name of the file, right? Value is going to be the actual, what do you say, the data, the bits. Key and value will always be there. The other things, if you want, you can add versioning, metadata. We will see those things. Okay. So your bucket holds the objects, and objects have their properties. Of course, the file size, all that stuff, right? And for now, we will use the S3 console to access it. So there are other ways to access S3, but basically to access S3, what you need, you just need internet connection, right? To access S3, you need say an internet connection. It is possible, maybe without that also, if you are inside AWS, but technically it is accessed online. It is not local storage, right? Some people try to use S3 as a, what do you say, attach it to an operating system like a local storage, but it is not created for that. You cannot create any file system. Like for example, you can install the Google Drive app on your laptop, right? And you can, what do you say, sync it as a folder or something, but technically it is not on your laptop. Even if your laptop is off, you can still access that Google Drive or online, right? Some people try to do that with S3, but technically it is not supported, right? Remember, it is online. It is not on the local machine or the local drive. You cannot create any file system or those type of stuff, right? So it is not for that. It is used for online storage, right? So one common way to access S3 is through the, because we are learning, we are just starting off, we will use the GUI, right? What is the GUI? In AWS, the official GUI is the AWS console, right? So we open the AWS console and we choose the S3 service, and we are going to interact with it over here. right? So I'll quickly open the console, right? You go to services and you go to S3. You can just open it in a new tab. Okay, so here if you see, right, so again they are just they keep updating this console or GUI, right? These days they are doing it a lot more frequently. So here you see again they've put a warning, some problem with the new console, they've re-enabled the old console, right? So they keep updating this, don't worry, right? The concepts remain the same. Simply the interface option from here, they will move to the left, from left to right, and they will keep confusing people. Why they are doing that, I don't understand, right? So here is the basic S3 console, right? So here you see that there will be no files outside, right? You can have multiple buckets to organize your data as you wish, but as such you cannot do anything outside. You cannot upload files or anything. You need to create a bucket, or if you already have a bucket, you go inside that bucket and you what do you say, upload the files. Okay, so you can what do you say, open the bucket, you can say upload, and you can add your files, right? You can say add files, and you can choose your files and you can upload them. Okay, we will see how to do all that. I'm just showing you the basic what do you say, interface. Okay, you can add your files and you can upload. Okay, so you don't have anything uh, outside. Okay, and you can have as many, I mean not as many buckets. I think the limit is 100 buckets, right? It is like a soft limit, right? If you want more than 100 buckets, please raise a support request. For what? For limit increase, right? Say I need more than 100 buckets, right? So you can give the new limit, they will increase it, but the default limit is 100 buckets per account. Okay, so we are going to use this GUI to interact with S3. Okay, okay, so one more thing is we also call S3 like a as a global service, right? But technically it is not global, but still they call it, right? So which location are you going to choose? First thing when we start using, right, similar to any what do you say, like most of the services, you have to choose the location where you want to use it, right? It is not like you simply upload files to S3, it will go and sit somewhere. No, in AWS you choose the region, you have full control of where you want to store your data, which region to use, right? At the bare minimum you can choose the region, right? And inside region what you have availability zones, right? So when you create your bucket, right, we represent a bucket like this, right? So when you create your bucket, right, you have to specify the region, right? Okay, you will say I want to create the bucket in US East, right? So your bucket will be created in US East, and whatever files you upload in that bucket, so technically it is stored in US East or the North Virginia location, right? You can create another bucket, right? You can create another bucket and you can say I will create it in Mumbai. So whatever files you put in this bucket, they are actually stored in the Mumbai region. So in S3 you don't choose the availability zone. That availability zone is handled automatically depending on certain factors, right? In S3 you don't what do you say, choose the availability zone. It is indirectly uh, what do you say, uh, what do you say, availability zones are used. We'll see how they are used, right? In S3 you only specify the region for the bucket. Obviously the objects are inside the bucket, so they are in that specific region, right? For the objects you don't specify the availability zone as such. Availability zones are managed by AWS for S3, by AWS for S3. For other services you need to choose the availability zone, right? S3 is one of those services where you don't need to actually specify the availability zone, right? But you will always have control over the region. But if you open the S3 console, it will say global on top. Where do you choose the region? You choose it from here. So S3 is, it will say it does not require the region selection, because sometimes in the exam you might get the question, right? Which of these are not are global services or something like that. So we have a couple of services, right? Like I said, IAM. When you go to IAM for creating the users, right? I told you you don't create a user in a specific location or the region, right? You can control access to the user, but the user as such is not created in any specific location, right? It will say global, right? So IAM and S3, we call them as global services. They don't depend on any specific region, even though they say that your the bucket which you create is going to be in a single region. It cannot be across two regions or anything like that, right? A single bucket is in a single region. You can use whatever. Here you see I have few buckets in North Virginia, a few in US, what do you say, East Ohio, US West, right? Mumbai, Singapore, like that. You can go ahead and create your buckets wherever you want, right? So the data inside that bucket is obviously there in that particular region that you choose, right? The region which you choose. Okay. So how do you create a bucket? It is straightforward. You say create bucket, you give your bucket name, you choose the location, right? uh, don't worry about the options or anything. We are just seeing the basic stuff first, right? You give your bucket name, you choose the region where you want the bucket to be created, right? And then you say create. Of course it has some other properties, we will see those things, right? So in,
Siddharth, one
yeah,
just a second. So we are creating an object bucket here, and this one, right?
yeah,
Hello, can you hear me?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So we are creating here, and we are specifying the region. So though we are specifying a region, okay. So after completion of everything, if you go and see the view, so it won't show the exact region, right? It will again show us a um, global, right?
No, 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 see, outside it will show global, right? Here it will always say global,
Mm.
but technically the bucket is
Mm.
there in the region, right? So that is little
Correct,
confusing
correct. Yeah, yeah,
because
understood.
you don't have what do you say, separate GUI for each region, right?
Mm. Okay.
If you're using any other service, right? If you're using a virtual machine, if you open the region only, you can see it. You cannot see it from another region, right? But for
Mm.
S3, you don't. It is one single console where all your buckets are there. They can be in different regions. If you see in this interface, in the same screen, I can see my buckets from different regions. So here you don't have to choose
Correct.
the region. That is what they call. It does
Okay.
not require the region selection, but technically your files are there in the region only, right?
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Everything is visible in the single screen. You don't have to go to different regions. For example, here you see I'm using some service called EC2. So I am in the US East 1 in this region. So in this region, what is there only I can see. If I want to see what is there in my other region, I have to open this in an other window. So in the other region, what is there, I will be able to see it only if I go to that region. Go in the sense I have to choose that option. So in this region I have something else. I have only two security groups. In this region I have so many security groups, right? So I cannot see the other region from this region. So S3, it is not like that. It has a single what do you say, interface or GUI where it says global, but
Okay.
technically the buckets are in these locations, right? In these
Okay.
the
Okay.
regions that
Got
you
it.
choose. So you always have control over the region, right? So the bucket, it cannot simply be there somewhere in the air. It has to be in some region, and your files are there in that specific region, right? How you know that? From the location that you see here or what you create. So everything is visible in the same screen. Okay. Okay, so to access S3, what you need, it does not depend on any specific OS or software, right? You can access it from anywhere, whether using your Mac or only the command line or Windows, right? Does not matter, right? You can access it from anywhere provided you have a valid connection, right? You don't need to use the GUI, you can use the command line. There are other third party tools also, right? You can use something like right, I'll just show you one tool, right? Right, there are different tools with which you can interact with AWS, but the official tool is the AWS GUI, right? So there are other people uh, what do you say, who provide other clients like this, right? So this is a tool, right? It is not used only for S3. It supports different platforms like FTP, SFTP, what do you say, Azure, Google Drive, and all these things, right? These are third party clients, right? So here you have what do you say, uh, Google Cloud Storage, which is somewhat similar to S3 on AWS, right? Mm, right. You have the Google Dropbox. All these are, right. All these are what, online file systems. Sorry, file storage options, right? Apart from that, you have your traditional FTP, SFTP, all those things, right? Azure Blob, like I said, is what do you say, is Azure's what do you say, S3, right? Similarly, the Google Cloud Storage is something like the Google Cloud's S3, and you have Amazon S3. So these are third party clients. They are also GUI, but they are not the official GUI. You need different credentials to access it. Here you cannot put your email address and password, it will not work. You need access keys, because all this, even though it is a GUI, we call it programmatic access. The only GUI is I mean the official GUI is this console. Any other third party tool you use, for that you need different credentials. Your email address, password, or your username, password will not work on these things outside the GUI. For that you need something called access keys. We will see how to use those things. But who is going to use these tools, right? A lot of people use, because sometimes doing it through the logging into AWS, right? Using through the console, maybe what do you say, difficult, or they don't want to do, right? Or they need to connect to multiple S3 accounts to upload some files. Then you can use something like this. You can create multiple connections, and you can save these connections, and you can just click, and you can what do you say, log in and use this single interface to access multiple stuff, right? So you can use these type of tools, S3 clients, right, third party, right? So that is another way, right? You have some free, some
So
paid.
this,
Yeah,
so this is this tool which you showed, right?
yeah,
Cyberduck. This
CyberDuck,
is
yeah.
like only, yeah. This is for just only for S3 kind of purpose, huh? For storing,
Yeah,
for
it's
placing
simply
the files. For,
to to access S3, right? So instead of using this GUI, you can use that,
okay, okay,
right? It is simply like WinSCP, or right, you might have used some file transfer clients, right? Something
okay,
like
like
that.
that. Okay,
Yeah, something. So it supports those also. It supports your traditional FTP, right? All those things also, right? FTP client, right? It supports all these also, right?
okay, okay, okay,
It's simply a client. That's all. You're going to access the same thing, right? You're going to access the
okay.
same thing. I'm just showing you the what some people might use in real time. All this in the exam, you should not say I will use third party client, right? Exam,
Yeah, yeah.
right? Remember, exam assumes that I mean, exam. What do you say? It expects that you have to choose the AWS service or AWS options. These are all third party what
Correct.
we can use in uh, on a day to day basis, right? Okay, so you need basically an internet connection to do all these things, right? And of course, you can use the command line interface and all that stuff. We'll see it later on. Command line interface, or what we call programmatic access, right? Even the GUI which we use now, third party thing, it is also technically programmatic access, right? Somebody else, they build the tool using the what do you say, SDKs that AWS provides to interact with it, right? Using the APIs they provide, right? How is the tool interacting with S3? Because AWS has provided the APIs for programmers or for the developers to interface with S3, right? So S3 is not used only for these things, it has other uses also, right? It is used a lot in programmatic access by the developers. One simple example is, you might have heard of Dropbox, right? What is Dropbox? It is also similar to the Google Drive, right? It is also online storage. So what do you do with Dropbox? Same thing, you store your files, right? You provide access to other people, or you keep it private, and you can access it from anywhere if you have internet connection. So when Dropbox was initially developed in the initial few years, right, Dropbox used S3 as the backend storage, right? Whenever you uploaded something into Dropbox, it was actually stored in S3 in the backend. But as the end user, you didn't have to know all that stuff. You had your Dropbox interface, you uploaded your files, and you, what do you say, you accessed them. But technically at the backend, Dropbox was using S3 to store the files. Okay, and they have since, what do you say, they have come out of S3. I think they're using their own infrastructure, right? They're using their own infrastructure. When they started off, they were on the AWS platform. That is, they were using S3 to store the data. So who does all that? That is the work of the developers, right? So AWS provides SDKs and APIs to access their services. So remember, there are, what do you say, different use cases for AWS or for the services depending upon what you are trying to do, right? So S3 has multiple uses. It is not just to, what do you say, what we saw is just the basic thing. S3, what you can do, store and retrieve files. How you can store, for what you can store, that depends upon your creativity. We will see what are some of those use cases, right? It can be as simple as simply backing up some files and storing them in S3 for future use, or actively you're using S3 as a backend storage for something like this, right? We will see what are some of its use cases. So here is just one thing, right? Dropbox, where they were using that. So if you're a software developer or whatever it is, you can use these services from AWS as a backend, or what do you say, as one of the component in your application or something like that, right? Okay, right. So the next concept in S3, right? So okay, we'll quickly see what can you use S3 for at high level, and then probably I'll show you some uh, what do you say, maybe some examples, right? So what are the uses of S3? Some common use cases, right? We know that you can store and retrieve files, right? You can store and retrieve any amount of objects or files, right, in S3. That is its main, what do you say, feature or use. But practically, what are the uses, right? Most common is backups, right? So you want to store some backups, you can use S3. It can be anything, whether it's your laptop backup or your enterprise backups, anything. It does not care what you, whatever you put, it is going to be there. Suppose on premises, you you have your own infrastructure, right? And then you're taking some backups. You don't have space to store your backups. Then you can keep everything on premises. Only the backups you can move to S3, right? Backups or backups and archiving, right? Most common use for S3. One of the most common uses for S3, right? Next is content storage or content distribution, right? Content storage and distribution. What do you mean by that, right? I will show you a very simple example, right? We have all used something like Amazon or Flipkart, right? This is one of the most common uses for uh, S3, right? So let us go to, okay. So for example, if I open this product, right? So what do you see on this page? You have some images, right? The product images, and then you have some other stuff like the product, what do you say, information, prices, and all these things, right? So on this page, oh, which component is going to be mostly the same, right? These images will be the same. The price and all the other details can change, right? All these information can change, right? But this image for this product is the same, right? Tomorrow the price might change, the shipping might change, all that information changes, but this picture, these pictures will be the same for this product, right? So what do you see here? It goes to amazon.in slash this URL. It is the URL for this page, right? But if you look at these pictures, if I go to this picture, right, and I go to copy image address, you will see that it has a different URL. It is not coming from amazon.in. This picture is coming from some other URL. If I open this in the browser separately, sorry, if I open this separately, I can see the image, right? So what is actually happening here? So Amazon is actually using S3, right? Something like S3, right? It's not really Amazon. You go to Flipkart or Snapdeal, whatever. A lot of these sites these days, right? When you go to some product, like let us go to this, same thing. You have this picture, right? You let us go to copy image address. You put this over here. I think Snapdeal uses still uses Amazon, right? Here you see it goes to some other URL, some folder they have, some structure they have where they store their files, right? Images, imgs, whatever
But
that company wants to use, right? That path,
so
right?
that so
Yeah,
here, I mean, the companies won't reveal that whether they use Azure or whether they use
I mean they used to,
Amazon,
you can
AWS.
you can mask it, right? I mean they reveal, right? Flipkart or whatever they have revealed,
Okay.
right? They have their own tech blogs or
Mm,
whatever they say, but
mm,
sometimes you can find out. It's not a big deal, right? If
okay.
what I mean is, a lot of people, they will replace this URL with their own URL. Earlier Snapdeal used to show it as Amazon S3. Now they have used their own URL, but technically still the backend is S3. We will see how to do that. Okay, so now what is actually happening is, this image is going to be constant, right? So what they do is they store all these images in S3 or something like that, right? Like Azure Blob or something like that. Let us assume they are using S3, right? So what they do is they store this image in S3, and they call that image, the developers, they call that image in the code, because you don't have to store multiple copies of the image. You just have to store this image once. You can embed this image wherever you want, right? You can embed this image wherever you want. If you see, the same image was available in the home page, right? It was visible in the home page. So it does not mean there are 2 or 3 copies of that image. It is just the one copy of that image, right? Which they are calling in different places. So to do that, you can use S3, right? Because in S3, if you see, every object will have a URL, right? In S3, right, every object will have a URL. I forgot to mention that, right? Whatever objects you store, right, it will have a file name, all that stuff, but it will also have a URL. Very important. Whether you use the URL or no, that is next, but it will have a URL. Every object will have a unique URL, right? Where do people use it? For these type of things, for content storage and distribution, right? Suppose it's a video or picture which needs to be frequently called or accessed multiple times, you can use S3. We will see the examples of how to do that, but basically it is something like this. Okay, right? How to get this URL, all that we will see. but every object has a URL. Whether you like it or not, it has a URL, right? So this second one, content storage, is what is content storage? Basically, it is usually images and videos. Mostly, it can be other stuff also, like Dropbox. What is Dropbox? It is storing some content in the backend. The developers are using it, right? Or maybe say your company has a HR portal or something like that, right? So whenever you join a new company, they will say, please upload your information and your scanned copies of your photo, certificate, all that. So what this application can do, right? It can store the information, your name, all that stuff, maybe in a DB. These pictures, these files, maybe it can use S3 to store them, right? Because mostly the files, they are going to remain the same, right? Your experience, all that, you might need to change or update or something, right? So for these things, they can use S3 to store. They can store it in a DB also. Not saying they cannot, but they can choose to use S3 as the backend for that, right? So all this part, this backend part, this coding part, who does all that comes in the developer tracker using the S3 APIs and SDKs, right? But in real time, if you see, for example, like I showed Amazon, Snapdeal, all those stuff, right? So if you are using it for content storage or distribution, say you are developing some application, right? You, in the sense, your company is developing, your developers are developing some application. So that application has some images. It has a lot of images, right? It has a lot of images or videos. So where can you store those things? You can store it in a database also, but it might not be very efficient, right? So you can store those things in the S3. You, in the sense, they will give you the content and ask you to store it in S3, and you give the URL back to the developer. He will embed it in his code, so that all your content is in a single place, is in S3. So all your big information like images and videos, they are stored in S3, and you simply call them in your application from anywhere. You just need to upload one copy of the image, and your developer, you give him the link to that image. You say, here boss, I have uploaded this file, here is the link, use this link. So the link is what I showed you earlier, right? So you can use that link. You can give the developer this link. He will embed this link wherever he wants. That image will be shown. There is just one copy of that image, but it can be called from anywhere multiple times, and it will load. Suppose, say, I'm taking AWS classes. So what do a lot of people do? They have their own blog, let us say, own website, right? So what they do, they upload the videos to the YouTube, correct? And then what they do, they embed that video in their application, in their portal, in their blog. So technically, where is the video? It's not in their website. It is in YouTube. It is physically stored in YouTube. It is just linked over here, but it plays in your application. So you are not using any of your data, your server data or anything. You are using YouTube's data. Of course, they put ads, but it is also, what you say, content storage and content distribution, right? If you take these news websites, right, they have their YouTube channel and they have their own website. So in the website, you can see the videos playing, but where do they actually store the videos? They might store it in something like YouTube or maybe even S3. It's easy to do it on YouTube because you don't have to manage anything. You just have to upload to YouTube. You get the link from YouTube. You embed it in your page. The video is going to play in your website. People don't have to visit the YouTube website to watch it, right? So all that comes under content storage and content distribution, mostly used for media and, what do you say, media like videos, images, big files, large files. You can use it for small files also. It is not that you should only use it for videos and images. You can use it for pretty much anything, because everything has a URL in S3. Okay, most common use case for S3 is this content storage and distribution. Okay, we will see this. I'll show you that with a probably with an example also, right? And then it is used for other things specific to what do you say, domain like big data. right? It can be used as a data lake. That is a place to store your data dump or whatever you call it, right? It can be used for these things, right? It can be used for DR, right? So like I said, you have something on premises, or maybe your backup policy says you have to have two copies of your data for DR in case something happens, right? So you can keep one copy on premises, one copy in S3, or you can keep two copies on S3 in two different locations, right? So you can keep one in US East, one in Mumbai, right? So in case this location has a problem, you still have your backup over here. We call this DR. Even though we call it backup, it's disaster recovery. If something happens to one location, you have your backup in a different location, or you have your two copies of your backup in two different locations, something like that, right? And then what do you say, again, there will be some overlap. We call it hybrid storage, right? Hybrid storage is what you have some amount of data on premises, some of it in the cloud, right? Something like backups. So maybe you keep the recent backups on premises, the older backups you move to the cloud. Suppose you need to store your backups for 2 years, so maybe the most recent 1 month backups you keep on premises so that it's faster for you to access it. The older backups you put it in the cloud. So it comes under hybrid what do you say, architecture or archiving, right?
So that the real time. So these are the most use cases, huh? The real time.
Yeah, some of the common use cases. Like I said, you can content storage means there might be hundreds of things, right? You cannot say each one is one. Like I said, a shopping site can use it for content storage, banking site can use, right? Online media portals can use it, right? So the use case is up to you. This is just some example. So basically, what S3 has, you can store and retrieve files from anywhere, and everything has a URL. Okay, so most common is the first
Okay.
two are
Okay.
DR, hybrid recovery. So other application specific like big data. Suppose you're doing big data, you need a place to store your data. Let us say they call it a data lake or something, I think, right? So S3 can be used for that. I'm not saying it has to be used for that. It is possible to use it for that, right? It is possible to use it for that, right? And S3 is a very important service in AWS. Okay, AWS itself, they use S3 for other things. Okay, so here I'm talking about things that we use it, right? But AWS itself depends on S3 for its other services to work, lot of other services to work, right? We will see what, because if S3 breaks, lot of other services will also break indirectly. It is not, even if you don't use S3, you're using something like EC2, right? If S3 breaks, your EC2 also might stop working, some features might stop working, because AWS itself uses S3 as the backend for other services. Like for example, if you take a snapshot, something called a snapshot of your storage in a virtual machine, that is actually stored background in the S3. Even though it will not be visible in your S3 account, the background for this is S3, right? Suppose you're creating a virtual machine, right? You need an image, right? So these images are also stored in S3 in the background. If S3 breaks, you might not be able to create a virtual machine, right? You might have some problems. So AWS itself uses S3 as the backend for its other services. What we are talking about here is as the end user, what we are using it for. But S3 is a very important service. Other AWS services depend on S3, right? So here are the some of the common use. But as we go through the features, maybe what do you say? You might pop up with other features or how we can use this, right? So it is not like you should use only for this. These are its features. What are its features? It can be accessed from anywhere. It has a URL. So pretty much for whatever you can use. Suppose I have a song or a movie. I can upload it to S3 and give you the link. It's also a use case. It does not come under any of these things, right? I can maybe call it content storage and distribution. I can give you the link instead of emailing the file or whatever, or using the Google Drive. I can upload it to S3 and give you the link. Very simple use case, right? So pretty much what you have to remember is objects can be accessed from anywhere, and all objects have a URL. Okay, That is the main thing. It does not need any server or anything. You don't need to keep any machine on or anything. It is always available for you. Okay, it is always available for you. You can access it from anywhere. So these are some of the,
Sid,
yeah.
yeah, I have a question respect to this the pricing and all in S3.
Yeah.
So is it calculated based on the volume we have used, or like the how much time we have access in it?
No. See, I said the main thing is, yeah, we'll come back to pricing, right? So pricing is, the main price is per GB, per month. Plus, I
Okay.
said there are additional cost. There is cost for
Oh,
downloading the files.
okay.
That is, as AWS calls, data transfer.
Okay. So
Plus,
in case and
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. So you have some cost for data transfer. There is actually some
okay,
cost for what do you say, for even sometimes for removing the files. We will see in what are those cases where they apply all that stuff. But S3 is available
oh,
under free tier, right? S3
okay,
is there under free tier. In free tier, what you get, the basic you get is 5 GB of storage per month. So it is more than enough for practicing, because whether you upload 1 GB file or 1 MB file, the process is the same. You can just create some small files, text files or something, and use it for practice. You don't have to upload GBs of data, right? So 5 GB per month is free. So while practicing S3, you will pretty much not incur any cost, because the free tier is more than enough for practicing for S3. So if we will just quickly take a look at the price then, right? How do you know what is the
okay,
pricing? We just go to AWS S3 pricing, because the prices may drop. Usually they don't increase. So, but for what are they going to charge you? These are the four, what do you say, headings: storage, data request and retrieval, data transfer, management and replication. These are the four main categories under which they charge you for S3. The main thing is storage. Main bulk pricing, the big chunk of the pricing is storage, right? So we will come to what is all this standard and all that, but you see it is per GB,
okay,
and it is not fixed like per GB so much. It depends upon how much you are using. The more you use, the less you pay, right?
okay,
So for the
okay,
first 50 TB you pay 0.023 per GB. Beyond 50 TB and up to 450 TB, you pay 0.022, right? Something like that, right? It is per GB, right?
okay,
And again, it is not, like I said, if you store 200 GB for only 3-4 days, right? So it is prorated. It's like your phone bill. You have a
okay,
postpaid bill, right? Suppose the plan starts, uh, let's say the last 6 days of the month, they will divide it accordingly and charge you, right? Something like that.
okay,
So they will give you an
okay,
example over here, right? uh, where is that? Yeah, we'll come back to that. I'll show you the pricing also, right? How it is calculated and all that stuff, right? And then they charge you for
okay,
these things also. Main thing is storage, but there are other small fees, right? So whenever you are
okay,
uploading something, right, we call it, this is the, what do you say, HTTP method, right? Put, copy, post, list, right? So S3 is what it is, storage online. So your applications can also use. Now for example, if I open Amazon shopping site, so there are hundreds or millions of requests made every second, right?
okay,
Or people are
right,
uploading files frequently to S3, like logs or something like that. So each of it is like a request. Depends what you're doing, whether you're uploading, overwriting, downloading the files, or reading the files, right? So they also have a small fee, which is like per 1000 request 0.005, right? Or 0.004, depending on what you're doing with the file. Are you just storing it over there, or is that file actively being accessed, right? So for those also you generally have some fee, but it is very small compared to the storage cost. So if you are somebody who is frequently accessing the files, right, like content storage, content distribution, then these costs also you have to take into consideration, because it might be, what do you say, significant cost, not just the per GB cost. You might have a file which is just 1 MB, but it is accessed millions of times per second, means the request cost may be more than the actual storage cost, right? Like for example, Flipkart or what do you say, Amazon, those files are accessed millions of times, right? So every time somebody opens the page, they are actually accessing the S3 object, even though they don't know it is S3 object. Backend, it is still a S3 object, right? So they charge you for this data retrieval, data request, and data retrieval also. If you download something from S3, you have to pay for it. Uploading into that, there is no data transfer cost,
Okay.
right? Uploading into S3, there is no data transfer cost. What is data transfer? So you have S3 bucket, you have some file. So this is 1 GB. So you are transferring 1 GB, right? You are putting 1 GB into S3, right? So this is 1 GB of data is transferred. So if you look at your internet bandwidth, it will say you have consumed 1 GB of upload on your internet, on your ISP side. S3, you are putting 1 GB. You can put into S3, data into S3 is free. That is the data transfer. But if you are taking data out of S3, if you are downloading some files from S3, then you pay some fee for that also. Data transfer in is free. Data transfer out, you pay. Out from S3, not from your machine. From your machine upload, you pay your ISP for that. But taking data out of S3, you pay AWS cost for that. So all these are, you can say, indirect or hidden costs.
Okay.
Right? You pay for these things also. Right? But how much you pay? They are what do you say? Small, you can say. Okay. Okay. They will have some pricing example or whatever, right? So you can see that under the billing FAQs. I'll just show you an example, right? So don't go too deep into that, right? Because even they themselves will not understand the pricing, right? But you have to understand that they charge you for these things, right? If you look at the data transfer, right, you pay for all bandwidth except this, that is data transferred into S3 from internet is free, right? Sometimes you might transfer data from one region to another region, you might copy your files from one region. For that also you might have a small fee.
Okay.
Right? So all data transfer in is usually free, right? When you're taking data out from S3 to the internet means what? To anything outside AWS. Let us say you are downloading the files, right? So up to 1 GB per month is free. Like, of course, you will have some free limit. That's why I said while practicing, it will mostly be 0, because you will just upload small files and see, right? Up to 1 GB per month you can download for free, take it out for free. Apart from that, you pay a small fee. Okay. So same thing, whether you're taking data out to the internet or you're taking from S3 to another AWS service, right?
Okay.
You pay a small fee. So, but you should know that they have these small fees also, right? It is not just per GB, right? These are the 4 main, what do you say, categories. Main thing is storage per GB, then requests and retrievals, data transfers, and management and replication. We will see what is that management and replication.
Okay.
Right?
I have one question, one more follow-up question with that. So, assume like I have put 10 GB of data this month. After that, I did use that S3 storage and not even retrieve or push any data into the S3 next couple of months. Will it chargeable or
yes.
the?
You use it, right? Your data is there, means you pay for it. So you will be charged for how much ever storage you're occupying.
Okay.
But see, Siddharth, yeah. But that actually, based on his just question, like the data is coming from internet and he's putting into S3, right? But he's not using, nothing he's doing. Just he's placing the data. That's it.
You are occupying space, right? Simply they will not, right? You are occupying the space. You have to pay.
Okay.
Like I said, if you are staying for house rent and you have gone out of station, you cannot tell your owner, I'm not staying, I will not pay, right?
Yeah.
So your stuff is there in the house. They will throw it out if you don't pay. Same thing. So the main thing is,
only, understood.
Main thing is, once you store anything in S3, you pay for the storage, and anything you do with the data, for that also small fee is there.
Okay.
If you don't do anything,
So
you pay only the storage fee. Like you're
Okay.
taking a
So
backup.
here,
Yeah.
correct. So here the main point is placing the file from, into that S3. There's no charge.
So there is no charge for the data transfer. That's what I said. The cost is
That is.
per GB you pay.
Okay. Okay.
Per GB is what? Storing. The file has come to S3, it is staying in S3. So for that you
Okay.
have to pay.
Okay.
But
Got
you
it.
don't pay for transferring in. You don't pay the data transfer
Okay.
cost. But when you
Okay.
download that file, you have to pay data transfer cost. Like
Okay.
say transport cost for moving the file from S3 to your own laptop. If you're downloading a file from S3 to your laptop, you pay data transfer cost. Storage cost is for keeping it in S3. For taking out of S3, for downloading out of S3, you are using their bandwidth. Right? Internet is not free. Right? They also have to pay the internet bill and all that stuff. Right? So they charge you for everything. So even though for us it might look like it is per GB, there are these other hidden costs.
Okay. Okay.
Right? Because when you take data out of S3, you are using their download bandwidth. So they are charging you for the data transfer apart from the storage. Right? Your file may still be there in S3. You are downloading a copy of it basically. So when you download it, it is called data transfer out. That is, you're taking it out of S3. You're downloading a copy of that file. So you pay some data transfer cost depending on where you're taking it out. If you take it out to the internet, you pay a fee. If you're taking it down into another location in AWS, you pay an appropriate fee for that. All this comes under data transfer. It is separate from storage. Storage is what you are occupying, the space you are occupying. This everybody has to pay. If you just keep the file, you pay only the storage file. Suppose you take a backup file, it is there in S3, nobody is accessing it, you're not downloading it, you're just keeping it there. You pay the storage fee because you are not going to do any requests or data transfer, because data transfer in is free. When you're uploading anything into S3, you don't actually pay anything from the internet. Right? Data transfer out. When you take anything out of S3, you can take it to internet, you can take it to another AWS service, you pay accordingly. Right? Suppose you're moving files from one region to another region, right? You pay accordingly. Right? So just a example, right? So the pricing example was there where where was it? I just opened the URL, I think. Yeah. So where is that? AWS S3 billing FAQs. Yeah. So here, if you see, they have given an example, right? How much does S3 cost? Which is why I said after the class, if you just go through these things, right, it will be a little more easier for you to understand, right? So how will I be charged and billed for S3? So they have given an example. So there is no upfront fee, like I said, right? You pay for whatever you use, right? So if you're a new customer, you get 5 GB of storage with so many requests also included. You get 20,000 requests, which is more than enough, right? When you're accessing the files or whatever. 15 GB of data transfer in, 15 GB of data transfer out each month is free. So it is more than enough for practicing, right? You can take out up to 15 GB of data transfer per month. Okay. So apart from that, you have additional fees, right? So here is they're giving an example, right? Assume you store 100 GB. You just read this calculation, they themselves will not understand, but just the rough idea you have to get, right? If you are storing 100 GB of data for 15 days in March, right, and 100 TB, whatever, right? We have we'll just talk about what is this storage class and all that, right? So how much you will be charged, right? So the calculation is like this. Basically, it is prorated, right? It is prorated. Apart from that, you might have to pay for data transfer. That depends on where you're transferring it from or where you're transferring out to, right? So they are just given a small example, right? So as we practice, you will get the hang of it, right? But remember, the data is, it is going to be calculated like prorated. If you store for 6 days, if you store 100 GB for 6 days, you divide it accordingly, and your monthly bill will not say you stored 100 GB, it will say you stored 3 GB or something.
Okay.
Okay, so that's how they calculate the cost. It is prorated. If you remove the file in 4-5 days, you pay only for the 4-5 days, right?
Okay.
So you have stored 100 GB, it's going to be divided or something like that by the number of days you have used in that particular month, right? And calculated, right? So it is going to be calculated something like this: the total bytes into number of days into number of hours divided by days, right? Something like this, right? So it is calculated in per GB per month, right? So these are the calculations, but they themselves don't understand, or it is little confusing. But once you start using it, you will get the hang of it. You will know based on your usage pattern, right? So those are the costs. So free tier is more than enough for practicing uh, S3. Okay. Okay. So guys, we'll just take a small break for 15 minutes. Okay, and then we'll continue for the next 1 hour. Okay.
Okay, sure.
Okay. I'll catch you guys in 15 minutes from now.
Okay.
Sure. Okay.
Okay. So we will talk about how to actually start using S3, or what are some of its other properties and in detail. Right. The first thing in S3 that you have to understand now is they have something called storage classes. Right. So what is storage classes? So S3 basically what you have, just remember this image. Whenever you see this, it means they're referring to a S3 bucket and objects. Whatever is outside is the bucket. It is your container for your objects. Inside is your obviously your objects. This is basically what you have in S3. It's all about buckets and objects and how you configure and use them. Okay. So you have something called storage class. So AWS has, let us say, 1, 2, 3. Let me just put it down. You have standard standard IA. Then you have one zone IA. Then you have glacier. You have glacier deep archive. Then in between you have something called intelligent tiering, and then you have something called RRS. This is legacy. So they have something called storage classes. So basically you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, plus you have these additional 2 things, right? So what is the storage class actually, right? So in S3 what you can store your files. So they are giving different classes or different categories. So each has its own features and benefits, right? For example, take, say if you are going in a train, right? You have different classes, right? First AC, second AC, right? Third AC, sleeper, unreserved. So what are all these are classes? So the more you pay, the more features you get, right? Same thing over here, something similar, right? What is a storage class? It is you are getting some additional benefits, or some benefits are not there, right? So whenever you are storing your objects, it will be in one of these storage classes. Storage classes are for objects. It is not for a bucket. Bucket as such, it does not have any what do you say, storage class, right? Your bucket you create, bucket is what is just a container for your files. So your objects will belong to a particular storage class. So which storage class are you going to use, what are its features, or what you should understand, because in real time which storage class are you going to use, or for your files, because you might use S3 for different things. Some people use it for content, some people use it for backup, some people use it for both. So when you store your objects, which storage class are you going to choose, or what are the features of these storage classes is what you should understand. Okay. Sorry. Okay. Okay. So these are the storage classes which are available. One is called standard, which is the default. if you don't choose anything, all your objects will be in the standard storage class. And then we will come back to this intelligent tiering afterwards. Don't worry about this intelligent tiering. Then you have something called standard infrequent access. Then you have right, standard is the default. Sorry, standard is the default, and then you have something called standard infrequent access or IA. Then you have one zone IA, one zone infrequent access. Then you have glacier deep archive. In between you have something called RRS, which is legacy. It is still available but not recommended to use. Right, earlier they had only 3 storage classes: standard, one zone, and what do you say, I think glacier. Right, standard, sorry, standard, RRS. Right, they had. Then they have bought in this other things, right, like glacier deep archive, one zone IA, and RRS is now legacy. It is still available. It is called the reduced redundancy storage. Full form of RRS is reduced redundancy storage. Now it has been replaced by one zone IA, but still RRS is there, but it doesn't make sense to use it because it is expensive than the other storage classes. So think of this as old. It is no longer really used or recommended to be used, but it is still available, this option. Right, so what are the features of each of these storage classes? Right, so the first thing you have to understand prior to going to those things is what is durability and what is availability. Right, so what is the difference between something called durability and availability? So in S3, what are you doing? You are storing your files and then you are accessing them. Right, so when you store your files or objects in S3, how durable is it going to be, or how available is it going to be? That is important. Right, when you're storing any data, it has to be there. When you need it, it has to be there. Right, so what is durability is, think of it as uh, okay, first we'll talk about availability. What is availability? Right, so take for example your house. Right, you have your house key. Right, so you have two keys. One you have, one your kid has, or something like that. Your wife or family member, they have another key. Right, so say you people have gone to office and you come back from office, nobody is there at home, and you lost your key. So what happens when you lose your key? You don't have access to your house, but your house and the property, everything inside is safe. Right, so your house property is safe. You have to wait until you get a duplicate key, or somebody else comes and opens it for you. Right, so your availability goes down. That is, your data is safe, that is, your house and everything is safe, but temporarily you don't have access to it. Right, so same thing, when you store data in S3 and you, for some reason, you don't have access to it, then it means the availability is down. It is not currently available, but it is there, but you are not able to access it. Suppose you are using internet banking and the bank portal has some problem. Right, the website is not working. So what, your money is not lost. You don't have access to that money at the moment. Maybe after half an hour or 1 hour it will become available because of some technical problem. So same thing, S3 can have problems at AWS end. S3 might experience problems. During those times, your data may not be accessible to you, but it is still present over there. It is not lost. We call that availability. Right, so AWS guarantees up to 99.99% availability. Nobody can guarantee 100% availability. Right, it goes up to, right, it is not 99.99 for everything. Up to 99.99% availability is there, SLA, for certain storage classes. Right, so availability is your data is there but you're unable to access. You may be unable to access it for a few minutes or for a few hours or for a few seconds. Right, all that is SLA. We call that availability. Then what is durability? Durability is when you store something in S3, what is the probability of you losing the data? right? What is the probability of you losing that data? Data means not the entire bucket. Maybe some objects might be lost, because at the back end they're using obviously some storage, some drives, so they can have problems. So S3 guarantees up to, okay, so much durability. What is this? We call this 11 nines. Instead of saying 99 point so many times, if you count, there will be 11 nines. It is called 11 nines of durability, and up to 4 nines of availability. So the probability of you losing your data is very, very less, or almost very, very, very rare in S3. Okay. So how do they achieve this? That is what is S3. Backend, you have some information. They don't tell you what technology they use or what it is, but some basic information you have. So how are they able to achieve this much availability? This much durability? Because they replicate the data multiple times. It is not like you store one file, there is only one copy in S3. At the back end, they keep multiple copies of that file on different storage media. Maybe it is replicated across the different availability zones. So in S3, what we choose the bucket, the region. We say create this bucket in US East, right? So whatever you put inside this bucket will be in US East, right? US East has what? 6 availability zones. So the data which you put inside this is replicated multiple times. It can be replicated across multiple availability zones also. It is replicated. That depends upon the storage class that you choose. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to replicate it. By default, by default, S3's architecture or how it is provided is your data, multiple copies are stored in the backend. So if this data has to be lost, then all 3 copies or all 4 copies or whatever, multiple copies have to be affected. That is built in. You don't pay anything especially for that. But it is replicated within the region, right? The data never leaves the region that you choose unless you ask it to move, right? So any data in S3, you choose a region, your data is in that particular region. It never moves to another region unless you move it or you ask it to move. So it is in the same region but replicated multiple times across the availability zones, or maybe in the same availability zone itself multiple copies of the data will be there. So it is not a single copy. For you it will appear like a single copy. You pay the fixed fees. It includes all this stuff. Whatever fee you pay per GB, it includes all this backend protection that you get, which is why they are able to say that it provides up to 11 nines of durability, right? How do they achieve this? Because the data is replicated multiple times in the backend and across multiple availability zones also, depending upon the storage class which you choose. Okay, so each of these storage classes, I hope durability and availability is clear, right? So now each of these storage classes have some features. So what are those features, right? So the first thing is standard. We call it S3 standard or simply standard, right? Which is the default. If you don't choose any storage class, default is going to be standard. So remember, these are for the objects. Your bucket as such does not have any storage class. Inside the files that you put, they will have a storage class, right? Inside a bucket you can have multiple files. Each can belong to a different storage class. One can belong to standard, one can belong to standard infrequent access. That is up to you, right? It does not mean that inside the bucket all objects have to be the same storage class. They can be different storage class. And another thing is, you cannot create a bucket inside a bucket. You might try to ask, can I do that? No, you can't. Bucket is the outermost container. Inside the bucket you only have objects. You cannot have a bucket inside a bucket. Okay, those things are also not possible. Okay, so what is the standard storage class, right? So you can say standard is the most expensive. If you look at cost wise purely, standard is the most expensive among S3, followed by standard infrequent, followed by one zone, followed by glacier and followed by Glacier Deep Archive. So accordingly, the features are going to vary, obviously. Why is it cheaper? You probably have some limitation, some feature. So you should know from exam point of view, when you have to choose what storage class. Same file, right? If you have one file, which storage class are you going to put it? Or how are you going to manage the storage class? How are you going to optimize for cost, right? Or how are you going to optimize for availability, right? Those are the things that come in the exam. We will see that, and practical also. Okay, so let me go ahead, create a bucket quickly. So don't worry about the other options. For now, we will just create a bucket, and then we will quickly talk about the storage classes, then come back to the other properties. What is today's date? August 30th. Right, I'm creating the bucket in this location, US East. Create. Okay, so I open the bucket, right? I can say upload. I can add my files. Right, you can just use any file. You don't have to what do you say? Just put some text file or some small image or whatever, right? So I'm uploading this file. If I go to the next step, it will ask me to choose the what do you say? What do you say? Permissions and all that stuff. Then it will ask you to use the storage class. Okay, by default it is standard. So here they are just putting you in the GUI. They are saying what it is useful for: frequently accessed data, right? So I'm saying upload. Okay, so my file is uploaded. It is there in the standard storage class. Okay, so what are the features of this standard storage class? Okay, so maybe let us just open the AWS document itself, right? Yeah, so you have the information over here, right? Anyway, I will explain it to you, right? See, they have all these things, right? And they have a summary also, a table of all these things, right? So first we take S3 standard. So S3 standard is used for frequently accessed data, and it provides the highest durability and highest availability. Okay, it provides 11 nines of durability and 4 nines of availability. So how are they achieving this? Because your data is replicated in up to or greater than or equal to 3 availability zones. So when you upload something into S3 standard, that file that you upload is replicated in at least 3 availability zones. So even if multiple availability zones go down, your data is still safe. But if all 3 go down, you can't do anything. That is why they can't guarantee 100% durability, right? Availability is what? Whether you're able to access the file. Like I said, sometimes there might be some connectivity problem, power problem, software issues, which might prevent you from accessing your file, which also happens rarely, but it is more common than losing your data. Maybe once a year or something. Availability might be, you might notice some downtime, like a few minutes or something. It's not like it will be down for 1 or 2 days. The maximum has been, I think, 8-9 hours, right? But it might not affect everybody, because like I said, nobody uses all the regions. If you are using that particular what do you say, the region and that particular availability zones, then it might be affected. But it does happen. Availability issues happen more often than durability issues. Durability means you have lost the object, you cannot recover it, right? So how are they achieving this durability? By replicating your data across 3 or more availability zones, which is the main feature, right? So it is used for frequently accessed data, right? So when you upload something into S3, if you see, for example, this particular object, if I click on that, if I look at its properties, it will have a URL called the object URL. Key is the file name, then it will have a URL. We will see how to construct this URL, or how this URL format is, but basically you have a URL, right? Like how I showed you in Amazon or Flipkart or Snapdeal. right? So you can take this URL and you can embed it in your code. So if this is an image or something which you need to embed in your application, you can give this URL to your developer. Of course, you have to change the permissions for the object and all that stuff. We'll see. But basically, here is the object URL. You can take this, you can embed it, and it will open. Right? Say so it does not mean S3 you use to only download the files. It can be used to embed in the applications and access it. It is also a type of what do you say, accessing the file, right? So if you are using it for something like that, where frequently the data is accessed, right? Like I said, Flipkart or Amazon, those pages are opened hundreds of times every hour, right? So that particular object, that image or whatever, right? It is frequently accessed. It is not like a backup. Backups you don't frequently access. Backup, what you do, you take the backup, you store the backup. You might access it, you might not access it, right? So it is, backup is a type of infrequently accessed data, whereas these type of things, content delivery, right, or you need to for some reason frequently access this file, then you can use standard storage class. Okay, because it does not have any other fees. It is fixed, like per GB so much you pay, for the other data transfer, all that fixed. You don't have any other conditions apply, right? You don't have any minimum storage duration, minimum object size. You don't have any such thing. You put as small as or as big as a file you want, and if you are going to access it frequently, then standard is a good choice. Then you have standard infrequent access, and it is cheaper than standard. Okay, standard infrequent access. So standard infrequent access also, right, it provides low latency. So all these are common, right? Low latency is where, when you're embedding the objects, when you're calling the objects, right? Suppose you're opening Amazon shopping site, you want the picture to load immediately. You don't want first the text to load, then slowly the picture to load, like a decade ago, right? The websites used to be slow, right? First the text will load, then slowly the picture will load. Nowadays it happens instantly, even though they are coming from two different sources. The web server is different, the content is coming from different, but the page loads almost at the same time. So there is low latency and high throughput, right? High throughput for both it is common, right? Standard infrequent access also, it provides the 11 nines of durability, right? It also provides 11 nines of durability, but availability is slightly less. It is also cheaper than standard. So what you have to sacrifice, the availability is slightly lower. That's what they say, but it does not mean it is only so much. This is the SLA they are guaranteeing, but mostly it is available most of the time, right? It is also replicated in up to 3 data centers, right? Sorry, 3 availability zones in that region that you choose. But why is it cheaper? Because it has some conditions. What are the conditions? You have to store it for minimum of 30 days. If you remove something in less than 30 days, you still have to pay something called a delete fee. Here you don't have any such conditions. You can store it for 1 day, you can remove it, you don't pay any extra additional fees. Here if you remove it in less than 30 days, you pay a small delete fee, but the upfront cost is cheap, right? Infrequent access is, I think, half the cost of standard. Why is it half the cost of standard? Because of uh, these conditions, like minimum storage duration, right? And then you have something called minimum object size. Just hold on guys for 1 second. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. So here, what is the condition? Minimum storage duration is 30 days. If you delete something in less than 30, it's not that you cannot delete. If you delete, then you pay a small delete fee, additional fee. And then the minimum object size you will be billed for is 128 KB. That is, for example, here if you see, I uploaded a file. How much is it? 11 bytes. It is in standard, so I pay for 11 bytes. If you upload the same thing in standard infrequent access, then you pay for 128 KB. You don't pay for 11 bytes. The minimum object size you will be billed for is 128 KB. That's what they mean. Okay. And then you also have per GB data retrieval fee. It's like your credit card. From the credit card, even if you have your balance, you take cash out with your credit card. What you pay? You pay not only the interest, you pay for taking your money out, right? Data retrieval fee, or like a debit card. If you do more than 4 transactions or 5 transactions, you pay a retrieval fee. Same thing over here. In standard, you don't have any such thing. You pay the standard data transfer charges. Here, all those things apply, plus you have these 3 additional conditions, right? So those data transfer cost, storage costs, right? All those apply, same. But plus you are charged a data retrieval fee if you take something out from standard infrequent access over and above the data transfer cost, right? Which is why the upfront cost is cheap, right? Which is why the upfront cost is cheaper than standard. Okay. So it also provides high throughput, low latency, but it is not a good fit for frequently accessed data. You can embed your object, say for Amazon shopping site, you can embed your object in what do you say, store your object in standard infrequent access and embed it. So people are frequently going to access this data. Then what happens? Your cost, what do you say, data retrieval costs will increase, even though the storage cost is cheap. Because it's frequently accessed, then you will pay more. So it is better to use standard for these type of use cases where your data is continuously frequently accessed. You can use that because there is no additional fee. You pay a fixed storage fee, whereas here you pay the data retrieval fee. Even though the latency and throughput is very good, but the cost of frequently accessing your data is going to increase. So standard infrequent access may be a good option for backups. Backups you take maybe every day, but you don't access that backup every day, right? Maybe backups you might access once a month, or you might never access, right? Something like that, right? Where your data is less frequently accessed. So it is not that you cannot store in, you can store your backups in standard also, but unnecessarily you are paying more money. It's about cost optimization. You can put your data wherever you want, but what is the most appropriate thing? That's what we have to understand. Okay. So I will give you some more examples also, right? What is the next storage class? Intelligent tiering. Don't worry about that for now. Just skip it. Next is one zone IA. Now, if you look at one zone IA, it is slightly misleading. They will say 11 nines of durability, right? Earlier, they used to put proper information. Now they are doing more of marketing, right? It is technically only, I think, 3 nines or 4 nines of durability, but still they say 11 nines. It is 11 nines in a single availability zone, right? So as they say, one zone IA, as the name says, one zone IA, it is cheaper than infrequent access. I mean standard infrequent access. Why is it cheaper? Because the availability is lower. Even the durability is actually lower, because your data is replicated only in one availability zone. It is not one copy. In one availability zone, there might be 2 or 3 copies of your data. So if that availability zone goes down, your data is lost. Think of it like that. Or the availability comes down. So there is more possibility of maybe you losing your data, or availability comes down, because your data is replicated only in a single availability zone. It is not one copy. In a single availability zone, maybe it's replicated 2 or 3 times, right? Which is why it is cheaper, and it also has these conditions, right? This also has these condition: minimum storage date, minimum billable object, per GB data retrieval fee, and main thing is it is not protected against the loss of a availability zone. If an availability zone has a loss, your data probably might be lost. but it's not that it happens every day. That is also rare, but it is more possible, even though this 11 nines of durability is misleading, right? Earlier they used to put the correct information. Now I don't know why they are putting like that, right? Actually it is only, I think, the durability used to be 99 point uh, what do you say, 99 or something, right? Still it is so, but they put 11 nines for a single availability zone, right? Okay, technically it's only 4 nines for durability. Okay, okay, so still the probability of you losing your data is very very less, but it is more compared to the other storage classes, right? So when are you going to use one zone IA? Again same thing, infrequently accessed data, but non-critical data, because the possibility of it being lost is more. So I can use one zone IA for these type of applications also, right? For content delivery also. But again, first of all, you don't have that availability or durability, and secondly the cost is also more because it is frequently accessed. So frequently accessed data, mostly people use standard. Infrequently accessed data like backups which you want to store safely, standard infrequent, right? Fun zone is like some temporary data logs which you don't mind even if it is lost. It does not mean it will be lost. There is a higher probability. What is that probability? It is what do you say, I think it is 0.01%, right, over a given year. So if you are storing say 1 TB of data, you might lose 1 MB or 2 MB or something like that. You might, I'm not saying you will lose. I have never seen, I have never had any data loss. I think once we noticed 1 or 2 files got, what do you say, they were lost when we put it in RRS. Earlier it was called RRS. Now RRS is still available but no longer used. RRS is also similar. The redundancy is lower. It used to be replicated in a single availability zone. Now that storage class is deprecated, it is available but nobody uses it. It has been replaced or taken over by one zone A. So we have lost, I think, 1 or 2 objects in the past few years. But yeah, it is possible. In standard and standard infrequent access, I have never lost any data. Right? So yeah. So from when you look at architecture point of view or from exam point of view, it means you store non-critical data. It does not mean you can't store critical data. You can store, people store to save cost because it is even cheaper and it is good. Some, for some people that durability is sufficient. They don't mind even if they lose for one file if they can save $50 to $100, right? So it depends, but purely from exam point of view or from architect point of view or from best practice point of view, it is used for non-critical data. Okay, it is used for infrequently accessed long-lived non-critical data, right? Plus you have these other conditions: minimum 30 days storage, you are billed for a minimum of 128 KB for the object size, plus per GB data retrieval fees also apply. Main thing is its durability or availability is lower, right? From exam point of view, just keep it as 11 nines of durability, but practically this 11 nines is for a single availability zone. So if that availability zone goes down, your data is gone. Whereas for the other things, it can withstand the failure of what do you say, 1 or 2 availability zones also, right? Whereas one zone, it cannot do that. And then you have glacier. Glacier means what? What is a glacier? It is like a in what do you say, outside S3. What is a glacier? It's like an iceberg or whatever, right? It is something that is frozen. So here also same thing. So glacier is used for archiving. Archiving means what? Very long term storage. Like say for example backups, say your backup policy says you take backups every day or whatever and you store them for 6 years, or you store them for 3 years or 6 months or 1 year, whatever, long term storage. So like I said, backups you don't access frequently. Maybe once in a while they will ask for the old backup, maybe once a month or once a week or something like that, right? So if you have to store your backups for 1 year or 3 years or something, you can use glacier. because it is even cheaper than standard infrequent access, and it provides the same durability, right? It provides the same durability, right? But the availability is less. So here they are just what do you say, for marketing purpose they are saying 4 nines, right? But they are putting bracket conditions apply, right? So they are just playing around with that, even though they say it is 99.99% available, right? So Glacier is also as available as the other storage classes except one zone. One zone is the only one which has lower availability or durability. The other things are all highly durable and available. Your data is replicated across 3 or more availability zones except one zone IA. But why is Glacier even cheaper than one zone IA? Because in all the other storage classes, you can immediately access your files. You can immediately access your files. Immediately means what? Whether you're embedding it somewhere or now I have uploaded something into S3, I want to download it, I can straight away go and download the file. But if you put something in Glacier, right, let me put something in Glacier. Right, if I put something in Glacier, right, okay, now you see this object is in Glacier. Now if I go and say the download option is not there, because Glacier means what? It is like cold storage, right? Suppose you put something in your freezer, some meat or something, right? When you take it out of your freezer, you cannot use it immediately. It has to be kept outside or microwave to bring it to room temperature, then only you can cook. Same thing here. When you put something in Glacier, you cannot immediately access the file or download the file. You have to request AWS for that file. You have to do something called a restore, right? So how long it will take to restore? It takes a few minutes up to a few hours, right? We will see what is that. So Glacier is not for frequently accessed data. You cannot. One zone you can put and frequently access. It is immediately available. The files are available, but you will pay additional retrieval charge and availability is low. Whereas in Glacier you cannot. You cannot immediately access your files. That is, the availability is not 99.99, because first you have to request for the file, then they will take a few minutes or a few hours to to make it available to you, then only you can access the file, right? So you have to say restore, then you have to say for how many days you want it to be restored. That is, how many days you want it to be outside Glacier. It will come to standard, right? So I will say I want it for 1 day. So here you see the minimum time, right? If you are taking out large amounts of data, then you want to use bulk retrieval, right? Standard data, right, a few GB, you can use standard retrieval. You want data even faster, you can just say expedited, but it is not immediate. It takes a few minutes. The default is usually standard or bulk. It takes 3 to 5 hours. It might take 2 hours also, it might come, but this is what they specify. This is their interval, right? You want data faster, you still have to wait for a few minutes. It's not immediately you can click and download. When you say do restore, right, you have to wait. You can't do anything. You have submitted the restoration request, right? You can just wait. After some time you will see the storage class to change, right? Now what? The restoration is in progress, right? We have request for restoration. Still I can't download the file, right? So you can use this for backups, long-term storage. If somebody asks for your backup, you can say, okay, tomorrow morning I'll give you the backup. Immediately I can't give. It's going to take a few hours or a few minutes, depending on what is the file size or how much you're willing to pay extra to immediately take it. So in those type of use cases or scenarios, you can use Glacier. Glacier is used for archiving, because if you put something in Glacier, you cannot embed that object and call it. It will give an error, right? Because it is not immediately accessible, right? But what is the benefit? It is lower cost, and durability is also across 3 availability zones. And what are the other conditions? You pay for minimum 90 days of storage. If you remove anything in less than 90 days, you pay a small fee for that. So it is for much longer term storage. Infrequent access is also for a longer term, but it is not for what do you say, archival. Archival means very long term, like 1 year, 6 months plus, something like that. That's what we call archival, right? You're archiving your data, right? And same thing, the minimum object size is going, you are going to be built for 40 kb, even if it is lower than 40 kb. For single object now it is 17 kb, so I will be built for 40 kb, right? And then the other things available, right? Per GB data retrieval fee you have to pay. When you take something out of Glacier or standard infrequent access, there is a data retrieval fee. But how do you first of all get the data? You must first restore the object, then only you can access them, otherwise you cannot access them. Like other storage classes you can immediately access, here you cannot, you have to restore, then only you can download the file, right? The last one is Glacier Deep Archive. It's what do you say, a relatively newer means I think it's been a year or so, or slightly more than a year, right? Deep Archive is even cheaper than Glacier. It is for rarely accessed data, and the default the retrieval interval is 12 hours. So you want to save more money and you don't mind saying I'll give the data tomorrow or day after, you can use Glacier Deep Archive. What is its condition? Its durability and availability is similar to Glacier. That is, you still have to restore the files, right? But it is replicated in 3 availability zones. But the minimum storage duration is 6 months or 180 days. We should not say 6 months. It is 180 days. If you remove in less than 180 days, you pay a fee. Right? Same thing. Minimum billable object size is 40 kb. Right? So all storage classes except OneZone IA, they are replicated across what do you say, multiple availability zones. So they can withstand the loss of data in one or more availability zones. Whereas OneZone IA, it is in a single what do you say, availability zone. Right? All other storage classes can withstand the simultaneous loss of data in a single availability zone and partial loss of data in a other availability zone. So even if one availability zone is totally what do you say, data is totally lost, your data is still safe in other storage classes, whereas in OneZone you don't have that guarantee because you can't choose the availability zone in S3. When you upload something, right, in standard, it means they are using 3 or more availability zones, right, in this region, right? This bucket is in the North Virginia, so North Virginia has 6 availability zones, so they are using 3 or more. Which 3 they are using, we don't know. That is not in our control. You put something in OneZone IA, they are using one availability zone. Which availability is their zone they are using, we don't know. That is controlled by what do you say, AWS. Okay, suppose I'm uploading something into OneZone, right? It is replicated in usually one availability zone. They say greater than or equal to 1, but the availability is lower, durability is also lower. So if wherever this is replicated, right, wherever it is stored, whatever if that availability zone has data loss or something, what do you say, the probability of this file being lost is higher than the other files in different storage class. But still that probability is very, very low compared to your traditional on-premises what do you say, infrastructure for most people, right? It is still safer than your traditional on-premises standard what do you say, whatever you do, right? So yeah, okay, so that is the what do you say, storage classes. I'll just show you a probably let me see if I can. Yeah. So that table is there. Earlier it used to be clearer. Now the documentation, little they have tweaked the documentation layout and all that stuff these days. It's a little irritating, but yeah. So here is a summary of the storage classes, but I always recommend you get that information from the documentation, because sometimes these values might change, right, or some new feature might be added. So that information will be there only in the documentation, right? The pricing and all that stuff, right? So all that information is available. I will share a document from exam point of view, what points you need to remember, right? So yeah, so here is a summary, the same table, right? I think the data is more or less the same, right, over here, right? So you have everything in a single page, right? Don't worry about intelligent tiering, we'll come back to that. So basically you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 storage classes plus one old one RRS. It is no longer considered a storage class, right? And intelligent tiering is also, you can say, technically not a storage class, but still they call it a storage class, whatever. So whatever Amazon says, we have to follow, right? So these are the comparison, right? Durability. Remember, one zone, even though they say 11 nights, it is only for a single availability zone. In that availability zone, it is 11 nights of durable. That does not make sense to me, right? But that's what they say these days. Earlier, it used to be only 99.49 only used to be the durability for RRS. Okay. Okay, durability, availability, some values might have changed. I think now it is 99.5% for availability, but the main concept is these things, right? These things, don't worry about the exact values. Main thing is these factors you have to remember. Cost wise, I told you, most expensive is standard, cheapest is Glacier, Deep Archive, right? So any questions on this so far?
So here, I mean, on the whole, S3 is basic for storing, retrieving everything. But again, as you said, it depends on which storage class we choose, right?
Yes, depends on your use case. So you have to
Yeah.
understand from exam point of view or from practical point of view what storage class you are going to choose for what type of purpose, right? So I will give you an example. Now, like I said, if you are using frequently accessed data, right, suppose you are storing some data, it needs to be frequently accessed, then you use standard, right? Like I said, you are embedding your objects in your application or whatever, like Amazon shopping site or whatever, some portal where your data is frequently accessed. So if you look at cost, so you have to optimize for different things. You have to optimize for cost, you have to optimize for availability, right? You have to optimize for durability. Some balance you have to strike, right? Frequently accessed data, standard, right? Standard infrequent is for, as the name says, infrequently accessed data, like short-term backups. Suppose you say you're taking a backup and you have to store the backups only for 45 days. So your backup policy or some data or logs or something you need to store for 45 days. Then maybe you can put it in infrequent access because maybe you're not accessing that frequently. Maybe 2 or 3 times in 45 days you might access. So the data retrieval fee might be okay, right? You're retrieving the data once or twice, so it will be cheaper than standard because the actual storage cost is half the price of standard, I think, right? So you want to store some short-term backups, you can use something like this. One zone, I told you, some people store important data also, but it is not recommended. Some logs are temporary backups, you don't mind if it is lost also, right? But I'm not saying it will be lost, mostly it will not, but that's what AWS says. Non-critical data, you don't mind losing the data. Okay, so nowhere there is no 100% guarantee. If you lose the data, they only pay you for the GB that you lost, they don't pay you for the business loss. The GB is hardly any money, hardly. I have never seen anybody get a refund from AWS. Okay, so they don't guarantee your business continuity or whatever, they just provide this availability. If it is lost, it is lost, that's all. You can get a refund for that 1 GB or 1 MB of file which is lost, which might have impacted your business more, but yeah, right? And then you have Glacier. So all these three you can immediately access your files, you put them anytime you can access, right? But you might have to pay a data retrieval fee if you use either of these two, but it is immediately available. All these three are immediate access. In a few milliseconds you get your data, you make a request, you get the data. Glacier and Glacier Deep Archive are not immediate, you have to first restore the objects. Okay, so for long term storage, and their minimum storage is, what do you say, 90 days or 180 days depending on what it is. So if you remove files prior to that, you still pay for it, pay for the 90 days. They charge you a delete fee. You can delete, but they charge you a delete fee. So appropriately you have to choose, right, according to your use case, right? So one more thing here is called tiering. We'll just finish off with this for today, right? So what is this tiering? So we saw different storage class: standard, infrequent access, say one zone, IA, right? You have glacier, and then you have glacier deep archive. So we saw which storage class to use for what, but it is not like a fixed thing for certain use cases. It is not as easy or as fixed that you can say I will use so and so storage, right? One important one, what do you say, one common is like backups or logs. Suppose you are storing them in S3. Suppose, say, let's assume your backup policy says you have to store your backups for 1 year. You take a backup every day and they need to be stored for 1 year. After 1 year you can remove the backups. That is your backup policy. Daily you are taking backup, right? You are storing it for 1 year, and then after 1 year you can delete your backups. That's your backup policy. So which storage class will you use? Any idea?
Glacier.
Okay, Glacier. Okay,
Please.
okay. But with backups or logs, right? What is the, if you see practically, what is the usage pattern? I said backups they might not ask every day. It depends upon your use case. How frequently they are asking your backups, right? Suppose you know that okay, these people will ask for the backups once a week or once a month, right? Suppose you take a backup today on August 30th, the probability of them asking for the backup in the next 15 days is higher, right? Maybe in your use case they might ask for the backup after 15 days once in a while. So what you can do is, instead of straight away putting it in Glacier, you can first put your backup in standard.
Okay. Then move to
Yeah, then you can move to Glacier. You can move either way. You can go from standard to standard infrequent access. From here you can move to Glacier, then you can move to Glacier deep archive. First you can put here, second you can bring it here, third you can bring it here, fourth you can bring it here. So you can say for the first 15 days keep it in standard. After 15 days move it to infrequent access, then keep it in infrequent access for 30 days. So total how many? 45 days over. Okay, so for the first 45 days you can still immediately access your data. If somebody asks for the backup, you can immediately give it in a few minutes. You just have to spend that time to download it, right? So you know, okay, these people, they will ask the backup in the first month, the probability of them asking for the backup is higher, so I will put it something like this. Then after 45 days I can say move it to Glacier, right? Then I can keep it in Glacier for the 90 days, which is the minimum, let us say. Then I can move it to Glacier deep archive, 180 days. And totally you can say after 365 days you expire the object or you delete the object. You can create a policy to do this. This is called lifecycle policy. You don't have to manually move it. You can create a lifecycle policy and say after X number of days you move it to a different storage class. Then you, after X number of days, you delete the file. So it will do that automatically for you. You don't have to move to all the things. You can jump however you want, but you can only jump from top to bottom. You cannot go in the reverse, right? The life cycle policy tiering works only from top to bottom. So you can go like this, or if you don't want, you can go straight away from standard to Glacier also. Okay, I will keep it in standard for 15 days. I know they will ask the data only in the first 2 weeks. Otherwise, I can say that I will give the data tomorrow. So then you can say keep the data in standard for 15 days, then move it to Glacier, keep it in Glacier for 365 days, and then remove. You don't have to go to deep archive if you don't want, right? So you have this flexibility. So you can move your data to optimize for cost and how easily you want to retrieve the data. So it is not that you put your backup straight away in Glacier. If you want, you can. If you know that okay, we are taking a backup It may never be asked, or it will very rarely be asked. Even if it is asked, I can provide it after some time. Then you can straight away upload your backup to Glacier and keep it there, or Glacier Deep Archive and keep it there. But you have to remember, immediate access is not there, and it is for long term. If you want to store your backup only for 2 days, then keep it in standard or standard infrequent access. You don't have to put it in Glacier. All right, you want to store a backup for only 2 days or something, then you can straight away say keep my file in standard for 2 days, then remove. So you can apply this anywhere. You can either transition, or you can transition and expire, or you can straight away expire at any stage you want. You can say keep it in standard, move to standard infrequent access, and then expire. But it is possible only from top to bottom. You cannot go in the reverse. You cannot create a life cycle policy and say move from Glacier to standard or from here to here. At present, it is not possible. Maybe in future it might be possible. Currently, it is not possible. Currently, this transition happen from top to bottom. You can jump from one to another, or you can jump from one directly to another. You don't have to go through the in-between storage classes. Right? We'll see this with a example. Right? So main thing is what type of storage class to use for your use case. And then when your use case is something like this, you should know how to transition it. Right? Especially if you're storing logs or multiple copies of your backup, 2 copies of your backup. Right? So in those cases, you might want to get a combination of availability and cost also. Both you want to optimize. So it depends on use case to use case. There is no single straightforward answer. If it is frequently accessed, for that only there is a straightforward answer, standard. Okay, if you're embedding some objects, they are frequently accessed, please put them in standard. Don't put them in infrequent access or one zone IA, because it will still work, but your costs will be much higher than standard because of the data retrieval fees. Okay, so what you can do is, for practice, you can just you go to the first of all, please go through the FAQs, right? And of course the S3, you can say just put AWS S3, right? You can open that page, right? You can just go through the pricing related stuff, right? Or first at least go through the FAQs. We saw storage classes, you can just open that, right? You can go through the FAQs, right? Don't worry about these additional features, we will see, right? So what is S3, right? You have in detail all this stuff, right? What are its use case, right? Some of the things you can read, right? Some of these I just told you, what is backup, right? What is data, like these kind of things. So again, each person's use case is different, right? And always they are adding new features and all that stuff. Don't worry about the new features for now, because every day something or the other will keep coming. If we keep following that, we will never finish, right? So if you have the free time, you can just read some of these blogs or articles by them, right? Because you don't have practical experience, you are just learning some more real time how people are using or those type of stuff. But leave that for the last. But first, at least after the class, go through the FAQs. What is S3? What are the regions? We saw these things, right? Billing, right? And one quick thing about security is, anything you upload in S3 by default is private. Nobody can access. Don't worry. Okay? Nobody can access it. It is private by default, unless you change the permissions. By default, it is private. So you can go into S3, you can create a bucket, right? I showed you the step. It is pretty straightforward. Say create bucket, you give a name, you will get an error, I know. Try to find out why you're getting that error, right? You let me know if you're still getting error, but try to create a bucket. Just put a bucket name and say create, right? And then you open the bucket, upload a file, and just see what options are there, right? And then just go through these FAQs, right? So whenever you upload anything in
So
Yep.
yeah, so Siddharth, today, like as we discussed, like we'll start on this bucket, okay, practical.
Yep.
So once we do this, is it recommendable to delete what and all we created?
Yeah, so that's what I'm coming to. So first thing is security. So it is private. You can keep the file over here, because you're not going to put GBs of data. Like I said, S3 Free tier is more than enough for practice. You will never incur even, I don't think, a cent, right? So if you are just putting small amounts of data, you can leave it, no big deal. If you want, you can delete, because we are not putting any important data. If you want to, you can clean it up, which is what I also recommend, because you can always come back and upload, no big deal, right? But your data is private, nobody can access it, right? Even though all your objects will have a URL, if you open that URL, you will get an error, right? If I open that URL, you will get an error, right? Even though I'm logged into AWS, via that URL, nobody can access it, because by default it is always private, right? Even if they have the URL, they can't do anything, because URL anybody can get. It is not a big deal. But now everything in S3 is private by default. Private means only you have access to the object. You have to log into S3, then only you can access it, because we have not gone through permission set. Permissions we will see after a few classes. By default everything is private, so you can upload files, you can download files, just see what are the other actions available, right? So mostly it will be free. Okay, so either you can leave the files here, or you can just choose the files, you can empty the bucket, right? You can do it from outside itself, I think. Earlier some of these options were not there, right? But now you can do it. You can choose the bucket, you can just say empty the bucket. You don't have to delete one by one file. Empty the bucket, and then you can remove the bucket if you want to. Even if you keep it, the bucket as such, it does not have any cost. Okay, so you can just put some small pictures or small text files, empty files, right? It is the same thing, whether there is content inside or no, it does not matter, just how it is working. Okay, but just make sure you go through some of these FAQs. You might not understand everything, but whatever we have covered, you will see, right? General, the regions, billing, security, right? And these storage classes, right? What is the storage class? When should you choose? Whatever I've explained, it is there like notes, right? In simple English, right? And I will also give you
Okay.
some material. I will email it to you,
Okay.
right? You can just use that from exam
Okay.
point of view, but practical point of view, it is better to go through these FAQs or watch my video again, right? But FAQs, some questions you might have not thought about asking or forgot. So these are most frequently asked questions that people have, and it is clarified clearly by AWS itself. Okay.
Okay. So, in terms of like a interview perspective and like practical or certification perspective, so it's better to start with the S3, right? Correct. So, what are your recommendation?
Yes, because S3 is a service for which other things don't have as much dependencies, because it is somewhat like a standalone, even though it can be used with other things, right? So S3 is one of the easiest services you can, pick up and start learning.
Okay. So, in terms of both interview perspective and
No,
uh,
interview
like,
is different. See, interview, they might not ask you about S3 itself.
mm,
So it depends on what that company is focusing on. So to start off with
okay,
AWS, what is there? S3 is a good place to a foundation to start up. If I go through some other advanced like the networking topic or something, right? Then you won't get the the feel of S3. Just
correct.
to warm up with the AWS, S3 is a good place to start. Right? Some people
Okay,
start with
okay,
the VPC or security or whatever, but I think S3, if you get a rough idea, then other services you will understand what I mean by permission and how AWS
okay,
operates, those type of things.
okay.
Okay. So in exam, S3 is definitely there, right? Don't worry. S3 is
Okay.
you have to know S3. You cannot skip S3, and it is even in real time one of the most commonly used services. Even if they don't use the networking or something, a lot of people use S3 for their backups or something like that, right? The uses are infinite, but we should know at least 40-50% of what it can be used for, right? Like I said, S3 has a separate documentation for the developers who want to use S3 as the backend storage. But you should know it is possible to do that. How to do that? That the developers will take care. But you should know, you should be able to inform the developers or recommend that you can use it for these type of things, right? As an architect.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, I'll show you. I will embed some files and also show you how to call them and all
Okay,
that stuff, right? But for now, you
sure.
just read about the storage classes, the billing, and you just create a bucket, try to upload some objects, and after you finished, you can clean it up. Okay, and
Okay.
then storage
Yeah.
classes, just whatever I explained, it is here. Here is the performance chart, right? Finally, they have it over here, right? Here, if you see, here is the actual one, right? Here you see they will put a plus, even though they say 11 nines of durability. If you go down to the plus, it will say that it will be lost in the event of a availability zone destruction. Even though they put 11 nines over there for marketing purpose, really it is not 11 nines, right? So the durability is lesser, right? Availability is also less. So here you have the summary. You just go to the S3 page, go through storage classes and FAQs. If you are more worried about pricing, you can read about pricing, but don't worry too much about pricing now. I told you it is there in the free tier. You upload small files, cost will not be there. But if you're still more worried about free tier, I know a lot of people are, they worry about the price and they don't learn the technical thing, right? So just keep the price as secondary. I know it is important, but uh, if you understand what is free tier and you're careful with it, you will not incur anything in S3. So if you want to be safe, please clean up after you finish practicing. Okay.
For now, I mean, with it, we will refresh this building concept S3 and the basics of AWS until now
Yes,
what you
yes,
covered.
yes. I will share a what do you say, a few pages. I mean, it has all the topics from exam point of view, like a
Oh,
summary of all
okay.
topics. If you want, you can just go
Okay.
through it. Or there are other material also. I will point you out because some of the material has become old. Right, there is an official book for solutions architect, but I don't think they have launched the new version of it because the exam has been updated couple of times in the past 3 years. But that book has not yet been updated. I can give you that book, but it will have outdated information, right? So that's
Okay.
why I prefer you read from the directly from the guide. If you want, I'll share the book. You can just use it as a rough guideline because AWS has launched a lot of new features. Existing features have been upgraded, right? So that book might be a little outdated, but still it is okay for just going through high level. What is there, right? I will check whether they have launched a new edition of the book. I think they still haven't, right? So I will share that official study guide also, right? Or you can download it off
Okay.
the internet also. I have not paid for it, obviously, right? It's all available online. I'll share that material on your email, but please go through the official documentation. Don't skip that because in real time that's what is going to help you. Should know how to find the answer, right? Everything is
Correct. So for
available on,
now, it's like
yeah.
it's I mean, solution architect C02, right? Exam pattern,
Yes,
right?
02. It has been updated. What do you say? Past 6 to 8 months ago. That's all. It just started off, right? So that C
Okay.
02 is included some new topics. The existing topics are same, but some in the past, because in the past 1.5 year AWS has added a lot of new services and features, right? Especially in the last 1.5 year. Last year they added a lot of new stuff. So in the new exam, some of those topics are coming. Okay,
Okay.
S3 and all is
Okay.
still the same old thing, right? Here and there some options have been added, but still the S3 core part is still the same, right? Yeah. So if you see the old book,
Okay.
this Funzone IA, Deep Archive, all those will not be there because they have come recently in the past 1.5 year. That book is almost 3 4 years old. So you will
Okay.
not
Okay.
see that information. So I don't want to give old data, right? But you should know what is their old, because if you say I have 3 years experience in AWS, very easy way of finding out whether you have 3 years is I will ask you what was there 3 years ago or what was not there 3 years ago, and what is there now, right? If somebody was really worked, they will know what is there, what is not there. That's why I keep saying this option is there, this option is not there, right?
Okay.
So in the exam they focus on the latest features, because earlier some feature might have not been available. Now that feature is available. So if you had taken the old exam, the answer would have been no. The new exam, the answer is yes. So you should understand that. Okay. So there are some features like that also. What was not possible earlier is possible now. So for the same question, you might see two answers when you take the exam dump or online you read, right? If you get the old
Yeah.
papers, you will see a conflict in the answers. So that's what you have to understand. Okay. So for now, don't worry about exam dumps or whatever, right? If you want, you can, right? But if you have the free time, you can, right? Like how Manoj used to do, right? He used to attend the class parallelly, go through the exam related some other course he bought on Udemy, which is also a good thing, right? But now you just go through this. Maybe next week I'll tell you what course to buy on Udemy. I mean, just purely focused on exam. Because if you only watch that course, you will not understand anything. If you combine my class plus that course, it is good. Because a lot of people have informed me about that. Right? Two more students have also recommended the same thing. They find it more useful. Attend my class, watch somebody else, some professionals, what do you say, video on what do you say, classes on Udemy. It is
Yeah.
easier to understand from exam point of view and both practical point of view, because if I keep covering everything, it is going to be never ending. So even I have been trying to put some videos on YouTube or whatever, I'm not getting the free time to do that, right?
Okay.
So
Okay.
I also thought, okay, some stuff I'll upload on YouTube and I'll give the links to you people, so that whenever you are free you can watch that additional stuff, right? I'll try to do that. Yeah, but still all the material is available, we just have to search and find it. I will give you some material from there. Okay.
Correct. Correct. And like I remember, like he was telling when you talk about this Udemy course, right?
Yeah.
So, so like he was telling some marquee some
Yeah,
kind of
yeah, yeah.
videos actually.
Yeah.
He
His
called,
Mark,
yeah,
Stefan Mark, I think. Yeah, that
Stefan
person.
Markey.
So,
Stefan.
so
Stephanie. Yeah.
please don't buy from that person called Cloud Guru. His number one fraud is he might be technically sound, but I mean
Yeah.
his course is a little too much of nonsense, less technical, and
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So purely exam point of
Correct.
view, those courses might be okay. That is for people who have already worked on AWS or you have an idea on AWS. They can take that course and pass the exam. But for people who have not worked on AWS, just starting off, right? Because
Correct. Correct.
passing exam is easy, working in real time might be a little difficult. So if you take a combination of
Correct. Correct.
both
Correct.
of them,
So
you
that's
you,
what
you
he.
will get a better idea.
Yeah.
That's all. As much you follow, the more you learn. That's all.
Yeah. Correct.
Okay.
That's what he was telling Stephanie. That is very useful.
Yeah. Because those people, what they do is they frequently take the exam. I can't afford to do that. They take exam like every month or once in 2 months to get the feel of the
Mm.
latest questions, right? Because
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
make a lot of money selling the course online, but I don't have the patience to record and
Mm.
put that stuff online.
Yeah.
Maybe I will do in future.
Okay.
Let
Okay.
us see.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
So I just get feedback from the
Fine.
students or from online communities, like what they're asking in the exam and that kind of thing. Because I don't need to take the certification every day. My certification also has technically expired, but it does not matter
Okay.
because it's valid only for
Okay.
2 years. If my
Two
company
years.
pays, I can take. Now I don't have the budget to take the exam because already we are facing salary cuts.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Okay.
So yeah. So no problem. Okay. So we'll catch up next week. In between, if you have any doubts, just feel free to ping me, or if you want a half an hour class or something like that, just let me know.
Yeah. Sure. Sure. Sure.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, guys, and I'll see you next week.
Sure. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.